33. Welcome everybody, and I'm really glad you're here, and I'm really glad that we have Jess here, who is a really wonderful, interesting filmmaker and writer, and actually an old friend as well. Where are my notes?
Come on, Rob, you've known me for a long time. You know, who needs notes when you've got decades?
Well, I wanted to make sure that people knew. Jessica wrote Bring It On, which is at this point, it's part of the culture. You know, people saw it originally and it was a very popular film. And then like those people had kids, which I apologize for saying this, Jessica, we're around the same age. We both look great. Those people had kids and like, they show it to their teenagers. It's one of the things that happens now, you know. And Jessica also wrote and directed Stick It, and is an active director. Even she's a director of interest in the Marvel universe as well. And we're just really lucky to have her. And I'm hoping that she can talk to the primary audience for this is I want people to try to, that aren't quite in film yet, or are hoping to be in film and media, or are wondering, you know, what the hell do I do? I'm an undergraduate and I'm terrified. I'm hoping you can hear from somebody who has a really interesting career and was at one point where you guys are, you know, and just kind of hear her story and where she thinks things are going. That's another thing I want to not forget is to ask Jessica about where she thinks things are going, because she has some really great points for folks. So I guess I'm going to stop blathering in a second, but we're really lucky to have Jessica, and
thanks for having me. What's the Emory mascot? What's the mascot for the school?
It's a skeleton, I believe, right?
Uh-oh.
Dooley.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I should have looked this up. I like to look it up and do it, you know. Yeah, thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Yeah. Now,
nice to be here.
Just to start, when so what did you study in school? What was going on when you were, you know? 18?
Well, I was trying not to die of anxiety, I think, during school. Like most young, you know, I left, I was young for my age, starting college at 17, and I left home, and my mom, there was a lot going on in life for me when I started college. So let me just say, New York City, 17 years old, rife with anxiety and ambition and fear, and just working through it. I worked 3 jobs through college. I studied English. I bartended, I worked retail. I did everything I could so I could afford to stay in New York during the summer and work some more. So I really was somebody, as a kid of a single mom, who needed to maximize my resources and opportunities. And I, you know, back then, pre-internet 80s, I was what we call now a hustler. And I really hustled in New York to make ends meet and to try and find my own way and forge my own way. And that involved, you know, I knew if I was going to have to intern for free, I was going to have to do work, figure out a way to make it work. So it was really juggling while riding a unicycle in traffic. That's kind of how I describe college. Scary. I didn't know what I was doing, making mistakes, dropping whatever I was juggling, you know, hoping I could apologize and do repair. So all the things you go through, I think at that, in that era of life, I was going through. And so because the great advantage of going to school in New York City, and Rob, you know this from living in the New York area, is when you're an undergrad there, you are free labor for all the media companies. So I worked as an intern for MTV and Spin magazine when I was an undergrad and living in a dorm and didn't have to support myself. So that helped. And that was kind of, I just started covering hip hop for Spin magazine, this very new-ish form of music. My first interview was with Public Enemy. I then went on and interviewed Salt and Pepper. So I got opportunities because I was in New York City, and my editor at Spin had also gone to Columbia, and so he knew he could afford to kind of abuse me as a cub reporter. So I basically, who knows? College was just haphazard, running as fast as I could, grabbing and trying not to knock things over. You know, it was equal parts damage control and just grabbing opportunities and making my own opportunities when I could. And that meant really bending, you know, extending myself, offering all the things, overdoing it, definitely. And I was operating at a high burn rate. I just want to say, I don't recommend it for everybody, but that was my college. That was college. I had no choice. You know, I was one of the kids, I was there on scholarship. I was there on financial aid. I did not have a plan B. I did not have a home to go back to for the summer. I had to make it all work. And I didn't. It was hard. I didn't. A lot of couch surfing, a lot of dog sitting, a lot of cats, like you name it, I did it. And that's one of the things I would say to you, my biggest advice to people in college is try as many things as you can, because if it works out, you figured out something new that you're good at or that you enjoyed. And if it doesn't work out, nobody will know. So, you know, you don't have to put everything on your resume, right? So I'm a big believer in trying and failing. Try early, often, and then go again. Dust yourself off. And if you're not good at doing that, get good at that. Like, so if you know you have anxiety and you know it's, you know, so first advice, try everything you can. Second advice is really learn about yourself. Because if you are, you know, we are all our own instruments in the world, whether we're storytellers or entrepreneurs or whatever we're doing. And if you don't know who you are and what makes you tick, how are you ever gonna, you know what I mean? Like, how are you gonna do it? So I would say really, we're in a mental health renaissance right now, thank goodness. And I encourage everybody to really learn about themselves and learn about why they are the way they are and what they're good at, what they're not good at. Be honest about that. Learn about that if you can, and you learn by trying and failing. Unfortunately, I wish there was better advice, you guys, but unfortunately you have to kind of try and fail. And I know, or just try and awkwardly be a toddler as you learn. And I know that's hard for this generation because they've kind of, you know, there's a lot of self-consciousness having grown up online and on social media. I know there's like a challenging intersection of self-consciousness and ability is what I kind of perceive from when my grad students at Columbia, when I was teaching at UCLA, they were very like nervous, overly nervous to screw up because they didn't want to screw up. And I think you have to get comfortable at messing up in benevolent and benign ways as best you can. That's my big rah, go failure pep talk.
Okay, that was amazing. By the way, if people have questions, it's okay to put questions in the chat and they'll appear, I think they'll appear to us. They may not, there are none so far, but okay, so that was college, sort of.
Yeah.
But
I was setting myself up for after college because I was interning, and I had heard, there was a rumor that if you intern somewhere and they liked you, they might hire you afterwards. And that's what happened to me. I had done enough interning as an undergrad that I was able to work part-time at both places, by the way, for no money. It was like, you know, job is a very generous title for, you know, the working in media in New York City. I think MTV paid me $100 a day for a very long day. And they would use you only enough days to not have to give you benefits. It was called permalancing. It was totally illegal. It's like violating every labor law. So I did that. And then I also did that at Spin. I was just a freelance. I would just pick up at $100, a couple hundred words here and there. And that was, I translated. So my college, I was able to parlay into writing gigs and media gigs after college. And then that became somehow getting into video production through MTV. I was really interested in music videos, this new form called music videos. And I started directing those on the cheap.
Now that's something they won't understand, because On the Cheap then was different than On the Cheap now.
Oh God, well, the tools have been democratized, right? You all have fantastic tools in your pocket, AKA phone. But no, we had to like shoot on Super 8 and get the film transferred to video, some, you know, analog 1-inch beta. And then it was very expensive, very slow moving. It was very analog. Could not be less efficient and more expensive. That's how it was back then. But it was a good learning experience for me because I would, you know, produce what were called packages at MTV, which was like, you know, MTV News, covers, I don't know, some band, Poison as a new release, and we'd get the I've got to turn off this buzzing. I'm going to follow his instructions now because the
Jake
dinging is going to
Jake's
drive
giving
me.
the
You're going to watch a person have a meltdown on this call.
I'm trying to find the Jake direct.
Anyone else here who's neurodivergent will understand, like, I'm like, my ADHD, the dinging will be, this will
Jake,
make the
can
internet
you
in a
talk
bad
me
way.
through this? I'm on the online preferences.
Go to
in
the Zoom
Zoom.
website browser, sign in, go to your settings and go then into meeting.
Yeah, you have to do it on like Google Chrome or Safari.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm in meetings. Sorry, everybody.
Or we can just add, okay, yeah.
It's not in meetings.
I'm in Zoom. I'm not in the, anyway, I'll live.
Well, no, I think I can get it, but okay. Just so you know, Jessica, I have two monitors and I'm looking over at my settings in the other one. So it's not that
Okay.
you're talking and I'm uninterested. It's that I'm
No, it's fine.
trying to do this thing. Okay, so you went to Columbia, you interned, you failed and embarrassed yourself because you failed in front of people, and you dusted yourself off, picked yourself up, dusted yourself off, and kept moving forward.
Pretty much.
You were challenged, and you then got some jobs at big companies for much less than they should have paid you.
Yep.
And you called it permalance, is that right? And that was essentially like,
Let's call it exploitation of labor. I mean, whatever you want to call it. It was, yeah, permalancing is something they do to get around health benefits. That was, I don't know if it's still a term of art or if it was just a term that was used then kind of inside the MTV, the bowels of MTV. But yeah, they didn't want to have to pick you up as a full-time employee because that's expensive. So
yeah,
I did that for as long as I could.
I think I mean, the interning rules are better now, actually, for the folks here that are still considering interning, but the permalance is, I think that's an even more significant thing now than it was then, where people are paid, you were paid by 1099 rather than W2.
I don't know. I don't remember, but I will tell you this. I will say this: in media and in Hollywood, Hollywood's terrible. And I've spoken about this at length. I just spoke about this. I've spoken about this on a couple podcasts, but recently on a podcast called Do the Work with Denise Love Hewitt, I spoke about, and I wrote about it in my book, the Stick It Screenplay book. The pipeline in Hollywood media, or legacy media, as we call it out here, legacy media means the old studios, the old networks, NBC, CBS, ABC, Disney, Universal, like the kind of old structure of media, the big old media companies, and the talent agencies have historically terrible reputations with labor. And the pipeline is broken at every stage, from pre-production to production to post-production, from mail rooms to sitting on an agent's desk. There are very bad habits, decades old bad habits in Hollywood that are in the process of being reformed, I hope. But there is a lot of unpaid and underpaid labor or exploitation out here, unfortunately, and I am trying to be a part of a movement to change that. I do not think it's right that UTA makes agents who are making well into the six and seven figures, having an assistant work 80 hours a week and pay them $400 a week. I think that is problematic. And unfortunately, because the experience coupons, as you'll be sold, oh, you're going to get experience, beware, beware, that means they're not going to pay you. And very rarely is the person who's hiring you going to bring you on as an assistant, so just beware. There's a lot of, I think, fraudulent labor practice in Hollywood and in media that's really exploiting position. And, so if you think it's a really good opportunity, great, go for it and definitely pay your dues. We all have to pay our dues. But there's a fine line. And I think personally, and I've said this in print, so I have no problem saying it here, although it's probably ill-advised, I think the agencies really need to look at their practices with assistants and mailrooms and interns. You will learn a lot, but you won't make a lot. And it's a very high burn rate, right? So that's just something I'd like to mention for the good of the people.
Noted. Now, I want to mention that you guys are not in the same position that Jessica is in. And unfortunately, if you have the choice of working at, say, Gersh or not working, you may get stuck. You know, we take the best of what we're given, we do the best that we can with it. So this labor issue has been going on for at least 30 or 40 years. People have been dying on sets because of it, but it doesn't, as individuals.
It's in the process of getting fixed because it has to get fixed. And I don't think we can say anymore, oh, this is just the way it is. I think we all have to politely raise our hand and say, I'm sorry. People need to make a fair wage. And if you are in that position, yeah, you take the job, but you also say, and I need to make a fair wage, or I have to call, you know, the county. Because if all of us are scared into silence, it never gets fixed. And if there's no accountability ever, there's no accountability ever. So I think, yeah, sometimes we have to do the scary thing and raise our hand and say, yeah, I'm willing to work, fair hours, fair wage.
Hear you. Now, okay, so getting back to your time not getting the fair hours and the fair wage.
No, right.
You moved into, and I don't know this part of your story actually, although I think it's in the Bring It On book.
Yeah.
But
which is in the Emory Library now, apparently, you guys. You can read about it. It's part memoir, part screenwriting how-to. And I talk about, you know, going to summer school at UCLA to try film school. I really didn't like it. It didn't agree with me. I'm somebody who learns by doing. And so I'm a more, you know, my ADD and things, I need to be doing stuff. Sitting in classes and listening wasn't a great way for me to learn. So I just kind of would rather go and try and break things, try not to break things. And so I did that. Yeah, I went to UCLA Film School, decided not to go to film school, was writing, then directed music video, tried directing stuff. I just would make little short films, and then that turned into directing music videos for no money. And then that turned into writing scripts, figuring out how to write scripts, kind of teaching myself how to write scripts. And then I got offered a job writing for a French TV series in France, and I went. And so I had to leave the country. I had to leave the country to get hired, as I like to joke.
This is Jessica. You're kind of doing the on the Seinfeld show when they were like, "Well, I met this girl, yada yada yada. She passed away last week." There's some stuff in there that I think we want to hear about.
Sure.
I realize it's in the book, but so you were working for MTV, and you were writing as well as a journalist. You moved into directing music videos at that same time. You were trying out UCLA. And then
no, that was before. So in between my junior and senior year, I think it was at Columbia, I took a summer screenwriting class at UCLA Extension School to see if I wanted to go to film school. That was really using the summer to test the waters. And I did not like film school. I realized film school was not for me. That was just something I figured out, but I'm so glad I did it and did a trial run, because it was just not a fit. I liked LA, but I didn't like film school. And it was so funny. I ended up teaching the MFA program there in 2019. You know, I was a screenwriter, a grad student teacher, but I really didn't like it.
Well, I suppose that's another lesson too, right? That it's of value to try something and discover.
Absolutely. Even if you don't like it, that's so valuable. And that, in my case, was definitely true.
Okay, so and then you got into you moved from directing music videos to some writing, but not significant writing. Then did you say you moved to France?
Well, long story short, how you have to picture this is 4 burners going at once. Okay, so you had, in hustle culture back then, as a freelancer, you had to have numerous things happening at the same time, and in the hopes that one of them would pan out, right? So I'm working at it, I'm directing music, I'm directing these little shorts, trying to get music video directing gigs. I finally start to get some directing gigs. I put writing aside, then the directing dries up. I pick writing back up again. I was constantly doing this burner, stirring things on the burner. And because I had had a little bit of success in Hollywood, I'd gotten an agent. I didn't get an agent. I'd been hip pocketed by an agent for
Will you
writing.
explain to people what hip pocketed is?
Sure. So agents are not as important now as they used to be. They're becoming less and less relevant. So I want to preface this by saying the agency industrial complex is a dinosaur that is going the way of the dinosaur. It's a very antiquated thing. However, back in the pre-internet days, anybody I would meet through Spin Magazine or MTV, if I connected with them at all, I would just try and keep the connection going, which back then without email, you know, was harder to do. So I just kept some connections going. And one of those connections was with somebody who worked at William Morris. And when I started directing music videos, I cold sent him a video I directed and said, hey, I'm in New York still. If you ever want to go to a club or anything, I know, you know, who runs the door at Nell's, you know, just trying to like offer something for the continuation of the budding relationship. And he liked the video and he called me to say, I really like this video. Congratulations. You really have something here. And I said, thanks. So I got enough little bits of encouragement that it left the door open, right? So I had a script that I had written. I sent it to his office. He said, this isn't for me, but I'm going to hand it to a junior TV agent. And if she likes it, she will call you. Don't bother her. Do not, you know, do not violate the trust of this favor I'm about to do for you, little one, you know? So I was like, okay. So I sent the script by mail. And she called me several weeks later and said, hey, I just read your script and it's terrific. If you're ever out in LA, I would like to meet you and send you out on some general meetings. Well, I made sure I was going to be out in LA. I figured out a way to get out to LA for a job or some tax write-off freelance shenanigans. I tried to make it work and I went out there. I met her. She liked me. She also hired me to dog sit her dog when she went out of town because she knew I was broke. And she sent me out on some generals. And that was it. Like, and I would just try and make, you know, you just try and make an impression or make a connection. And if there wasn't an impression or a connection to be made, to just let it go graciously and move on. But that's kind of, we call it now jokingly, the couch and water bottle tour, which is general meetings where basically there's a whole cottage industry of meaningless meetings in Los Angeles. And those meaningless meetings are there so the salaries of gatekeepers can be justified with their schedules being filled. Now, sometimes I'd say a small percentage of the meetings are meaningful, but at that stage of my career, you know, no, that's not it. It's an executive doing a favor to an agent because they think they should meet you. And hopefully you have enough good meetings that you start to build up some momentum. And that was that phase of my career after being in France. Jumping around, but yeah, it's a lot of schlepping, you guys, a lot of unpaid schlepping.
Jessica, someone asked if you could talk more about your French experience.
Yeah, so this is an important lesson that I learned. Because I was in New York, which was not a Hollywood, like not a lot of Hollywood people trying to be in Hollywood. They were trying to do New York things like be artists or be in theater. And so I was considered, like in my group, the expert around screenwriting, because even though I wasn't, I was trying it and I'd had this agent experience. And so somebody asked if I would read their script and I read it and it was awful. Like the first 2 pages was awful. And something came over me and I just said, wait a minute, everybody starts somewhere and who do you think you are? And like stop being a jerk. And you like this guy, you like Jamie, he's a nice guy, you like him. Get over it. So I patiently and thoughtfully went through the script with this guy, Jamie, who I liked, who's a nice guy. And wouldn't you know, 6 months later, he says, hey, I just sold 20 episodes of a show in France. Do you want a job? And I mean, like, if you had told me when I read that first page of the script that this person was going to eventually give me a job, I would have said, there, you know, I don't think so. But because I was thoughtful and for some reason on that day, overcome with empathy and kindness and just thoughtfulness, my great good fortune, 6 months later, I was offered a job, and that was to go write on a TV show called Sous le Soleil in France, where, get this, we wrote in English and they translated our scripts. I got to live in Paris. I got into the French Writers Guild. I mean, I still get residuals from this show. It's on my IMDb, you can see it. So it was, honestly, I look back at that time, and had I been a jerk, which I was very tempted to do and just be like, oh, I'd rather go, you know, I'd rather go whatever. this would never have happened. But because I thought twice about being a jerk, I overcame my natural tendency to be a jerk. It worked out really well. And I had a great time in Paris, and I had a great friendship with Jamie, and he, really gave me my first writing job. A friend of mine, a peer of mine, ended up giving me my first writing job, which is wild to me to this day. He's now in real estate, out of the business, but you know what I mean? So you never know. But if luck is the residue of design, right? I'd say I kind of made my own luck with that, because I could have done other things, and I decided to donate some time and energy to somebody else, and it paid off.
That was excellent. Am I unmuted? Yes. Hey, a couple of things, you guys. You can, I think you might be able to, if you message everyone, Jessica will see your questions. People have been messaging me, and I'm too unable to multitask to be able to read them. But if you just write, I think if you go to everyone, she'll see them. Jessica, just so you know,
Yeah.
Theatre du Soleil is the best company in France, someone said. I think maybe you've worked for them.
Oh, no, Sous le Soleil was the TV show, which was not the best TV. Well, it's a beloved show, but not the reasons you would think. It was basically Baywatch set in Saint-Tropez is kind of the best way I can pitch it. It was a shameless ripoff of Baywatch, and it was a show it was a network called TF1, which is TF1. And they paid us, I mean, back then, which was just this, I thought I had made it. Like I think it was like $3,000 a month or something to write. Like it was, I was like, this is it. I'm in I've really outdone myself here. So yeah, it wasn't, but I still make checks. I got a notice from the French Writers Union is very favorable to writers. And unlike the States, you make the same level of royalty forever. So you get it's something like a 33% royalty rate every time the show airs. So I still make this nice little like $88, a nice little check every time that show, and it's syndicated in every French country. So I get a nice little check every year, which is sweet.
Yeah, it's fun to get those checks and be like, oh, this is a delicious dinner. Okay, so Jasmine.
Or crypto. Now it would be, this is some Bitcoin or ETH. I highly recommend you all be exploring cryptocurrency with your spare change.
Mm-hmm. Jasmine has a question. How do you develop confidence that this is the right path for you?
That's a great question. Okay, so you won't have confidence sooner than it's reasonable to. So I think developing confidence is something that comes through experience, trial and error, and learning to trust your own resilience, learning to flex the resilience muscle by trying things and failing and knowing you can get up again, building resilience. So I would say build resilience first, and there's lots of ways to do that. And confidence will come through the building of resilience. So let's pause on this for a second and talk about building resilience, because the best investment you can make besides crypto is to learn about who you are and what makes you tick, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and to become an excellent communicator on your own behalf. So let's say, you're a little shy in let's say you're a little shy in certain kinds of situations, like talking in front of people. Now, you may pick a career where you don't need to do that, right? And so that doesn't need to be a strength or something you work on. But let's say that where you want to go, talking in front of people or learning to talk to bigger groups of people, is a skill you are going to need to have. Before you start doing that willy-nilly, I mean, you can join Toastmasters, and there's tons of online classes, free, paid, and otherwise, to help you get good at speaking in front of people in two groups. But if it's uncomfortable, here's the opportunity to think about, why is this uncomfortable for me? Who am I that this makes me tense? And what can I learn So I'm learning to resource my own feelings about things and learning to understand my own reactions and responses to things, so I can become more self-aware and use that self-awareness on behalf of what it is I want to do, right? Because I got to tell you, anytime I meet somebody and they're like, oh, I don't know what that is, can you explain that to me? I'm happy to explain it to them if they say it in a nice way. But when somebody pretends they know and they don't know, or is trying to fake it, I'm out. I'm like, no. So long way of saying, I think if you can sincerely learn to advocate on your own behalf, be real about what you do and don't know, find out what your weaknesses are, ask people for feedback when you can and say, hey, if you have time, I'd love your feedback on, anything you think I can do better, or what do you see as the future in this industry? What do you see as the future, and what do you think would be some good skill sets to have? And I would say to all of you right now who are interested in storytelling, that the best tools on the planet right now are on TikTok. And the user-generated content tools of the TikTok platform are bar none the best in the world. Snapchats are good, and Instagram Reels as well, but TikTok, like if you want to practice storytelling all day, you could be making TikTok or watching TikTok or studying TikTok for how storytelling is evolving in real time on that platform. And just go to the hashtag of your interest. If you're interested in mental health, look up hashtag mental health. If you're interested in witch talk, go to witch talk. If you're interested in spirituality, go to spiritual talk. If you're interested in drag, go to drag talk. Like TikTok is a school for storytelling, basically. And then there are TikTok teachers talking about how to make hay while the sun shines on the platform and learn how to use those tools. And so I would say, I wish those tools had been around when I was coming up. They weren't. And that is the future of storytelling, and the future of being able to make a living storytelling. You would serve yourself very well if that is of interest to you, to learn and master and study the TikTok user-generated tools, or not user-generated content tools. How's that?
That was great. I'd like to get some more questions from the audience, but I also was hoping you would talk a little bit about, so you're moving into this space, you're moving into this new media storytelling space.
Well, we have to think about it, right? Content is king, but context is God. And so the audience, the consumers of entertainment, when Bring It On came out, did not have phones in their pocket. In 2000, the consumers of Stick It did not have phones in their pocket in 2006. By 2007, they would, right? So the audience has changed, the power structure has inverted completely from the gatekeepers and the legacy media companies and the studios to the people, power to the people and the phone. So the phone was released in 2007 alongside YouTube. Hollywood could not compete with the exponential scale of iPhones, the internet, and YouTube. And so now everything is inverted, right? And you have these content creators who are able to do very cheaply and effectively what it used to take cast and crews and millions of dollars to do. So, and companies know that, and everybody knows you have to storytell to be a communicator these days. So that's what I mean. Like Hollywood isn't the only place right now. Fortunately for you guys, there are lots of places to be a storyteller.
Right. Yes. And I think that's a great thing to be bringing up. And I love that you brought up TikTok. I'm hoping that you'll talk a little bit about the traditional media space, and you still navigate that.
Yeah. Well, let's
where they're at and where you're at with that.
Sure. Let's talk about, we talked about it a little bit before the call, but so last year, COVID 2020, Hollywood took a $32 billion haircut. So Hollywood lost $32 billion. That's 70% of its body weight. So I don't know how many people you guys know who've survived losing 70% of their body weight, but the exhibitor model of films being distributed and shown in theaters has changed dramatically and will continue to do so. Hollywood, I don't think, will boom back to its pre-COVID size, shape, scope. And it's now competing with great entertainment systems in your house. So why would you necessarily go to a theater where you're worried about getting Delta and maybe having to wear a mask? Like, I think we're going to be slow. I think theaters are an experience that is precious and sacred and wonderful. And like, but there's better available easier now without having to pay for parking and get a sitter if you have kids. So has Hollywood caught up? No. Hollywood is a horse and buggy business at its core. Which means it's an old-fashioned business. And this is surprising to people. I talk about this quite a bit on the podcast I mentioned, Do the Work. I think people think because of special effects in Jurassic Park and in CGI, like that Hollywood is a very leading edge business. It is not. It is a very old world. It was founded, it kind of evolved out of vaudeville and the touring model and theaters and the mafia and agencies. It's like the history of it is fascinating, and that will help you understand, if you're curious, why it's suffering. But it's suffering because it didn't learn the lessons of music with MP3s. And the difference was that we're still paying for right now, and this is probably going to surprise, I don't know if it's going to surprise you guys or not, but it surprised my mom when I told her this. A song, so when we went through the file, the exponential scale of the internet and files becoming available, which is content, right? Song, a very expensive song, like a Dr. Luke producer of Timbaland produced song, maybe at highest end is 100K, not including Nicki Minaj dropping bars, who's gonna be like probably that or more. So that's like a 200K, maybe let's say max 300K adventure for that file, okay? Versus a feature film like Stick It, which was a $28 million asset. That's a yacht. So when those files were downloaded and streamed illegally, those were yachts being stolen versus Lamborghinis, okay? And so nobody was minding the store in Hollywood in time, and they hemorrhaged money. I mean, the transfer of wealth is still being calculated to this day. They weren't minding the store, old news. But it's important to say to you, because they didn't learn from that mistake really quickly. Look at Disney just got into the streaming business when? Last year. How long has Netflix run? So Hollywood, that's a long way of saying Hollywood is not quick to adapt, quick to change. They haven't learned the nimble lessons of the platform economy and the streaming economy. And they're suffering as a result. So that's why I encourage young people to learn on the platforms and learn how to navigate the tech platforms. Learn how to navigate YouTube, learn how to navigate Snapchat, learn how to navigate Instagram, learn how to navigate Facebook, learn how to navigate TikTok. Because that is where the future is.
Okay, that's great. And you mean navigate them as a content creator, not
learn how they work in the way that you want to learn that. So that's going to be different for everybody, right? Somebody, might be interested in, I don't know, travel, the travel content, drones. How can you use drones for beautiful pictures? How can you monetize that? That's a whole, just that one sentence I said, that's a whole category of people making money, right? Drone photography. They're crushing it worldwide and monetizing and licensing their footage. So it just depends what game you're in, right? If you want to figure out a way to make money and monetize your creativity, there is a world of ways to do that on these platforms. You just have to learn and study and figure out what you like. And also know who you are. That's, again, back to that point of self-awareness. What do you like? What do you want to be doing? What do you want to be talking about? What do you want to be working on? This is your one sweet life. So, and if you're interested in it, it'll help you through the times that are more challenging, right? If you genuinely like it and you're curious and it excites you, that'll help when you're not making, when you're not making as much money as you'd like to, or having to eat, Progresso Cuban black bean soup and rice was my go-to for many, for a good 18 months in New York. For 79 cents, I could have, my belly full for the day. So, you got to figure out ways to make it work for yourself.
There's excellent black beans and rice up by Columbia. I'm wondering.
Oh my God, I loved that place. Yes, I know exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Now there's a couple of questions Jake has for you. One of them is about he wants to hear about Bring It On, the opening cheer scene.
Yeah, thank you. So the opening cheer, Bring It On. How did that scene come about? And then, okay, I'll answer that first. Well, I knew that so I use archetypes quite a bit, which you can read about in my books. I talk about archetypes. It's a way to study kind of master templates of character, master templates in psychology. Think of it as universal emotional real estate. So, there's the archetype of like, the famous simple one is hero, victim, villain. Those would be 3 archetypes. It's called the Karpman drama triangle. And I talk about that in my book a little bit. So, have you ever seen the thing with the guy, you must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. You must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. You must pay the rent. I'll pay the rent. My hero. So that's all the archetypes of hero, victim, villain in 30 seconds or less. So what I knew about the archetype of cheerleader is that she is a subject of much, envy, disdain, dismay, horror. Like cheerleading, if you've gone to high school with cheerleaders, it's a complicated thing. And our relationship to it is complicated, whether we admit that or not. And so I said, in order to get everybody in on the ride, I have to let them know our tongue is in our cheek really big time and that we are very self-aware. And so that opening cheer is a way of letting the audience know, hate us because we're beautiful, where we don't like you either, we're cheerleaders. It's being really in your face about the problem, the existential problem of the American cheerleader, which is she is unlikable and beloved at the same time. And so that opening cheer did a lot of heavy lifting to get the audience comfortable, like, oh, okay, it's okay. They know I hate cheerleaders, or I love them. Like, it lets everybody off the hook and you can kind of relax. And I honestly wrote that in 5 minutes. I wrote that opening cheer. I had written the line, hate us because we're beautiful, because we don't like you either. And my parents are both musicians, so I'm really into cadence and tempo. And I use cadence and tempo quite a bit when I'm writing, which I talk about in the book. But I was trying to figure out the word game of getting that line in. And so I kind of reverse engineered the whole cheer around hate us because we're beautiful. Well, we don't like you either, which is off the beat a little bit. But anyway, so that was fun. And then, are there any habits or tendencies that you've noticed in peers or coworkers that you recommend we avoid? Cocaine, hookers, and heroin. I'd say drugs and alcohol are a trap that many of our colleagues and peers have not survived. That can be deadly or otherwise. Drinking and driving, I would definitely avoid that as much as all the time. What are the habits and tendencies? I would say you have to figure that out for yourself. Because what you need to avoid and what I need to avoid might not be the same thing, right? And so you need to know what makes you tick. I would say this, like, I think denial is a really problematic denial, and having a big ego that you can't hear feedback, you can't course correct, you can't humble yourself to learn something new, you're too self-conscious to admit when you don't know, like you want to know all those truths about yourself. Because let's say you never overcome your self-consciousness. Let's say you're always self-conscious, you're always going to be too shy to speak in a certain situation or too uncomfortable to speak. That's okay. Just know that about yourself. And then, learn to talk about that in a way, or have an ally that you can say, hey, I'm probably going to recede a little bit, or whatever you need to do to support yourself in that moment. The people who struggle are the people who never learn to do that. And the thing I would recommend, the people that I see who really flame out have very little self-awareness. And they aren't, and because they're not aware of themselves, and whether that's narcissism or sociopathy and sometimes psychopathy, they're not aware of how their impact on other people, right? And they end up burning that relationship, or, you know, they're just too much heavy lifting. People don't want to deal with them. Whereas the person who's able to say, hey, I think I really screwed up that. Are you okay? Like the person who knows how to do repair or knows how to get ahead of it. The good communicators win if you're doing it from a sincere place. So I would say avoid denial and avoid your avoidance. Like figure out if you're avoidant, okay, here's a book everybody should read at your age. I wish I'd read this book at your age. It's called Attached, the Study of Attachment. And our attachment styles really influence who we are and why we are the way we are. And this book really demystifies it and destigmatizes it. And so if you know, like I'm an avoidant, so I avoid, like if there's conflict coming, I whoop, boop, boop, I'll figure out the way around it, as self-aware as I am. And then finally go like, okay, I have to have this conversation. But I didn't know for a long time why I did that. I just knew I wanted to run. If anything was smacking of conflict, I wanted to run for the hills. And that book really helped me to say, okay, I'm feeling a little avoidant about this. Can you help me? And just admit my own shortcoming and then get help and then work through it in collaboration with people. And that's just a great skill set. Self-awareness mixed with humility, being able to ask, you know, that's easier for women sometimes than men. But if you can figure that out, that is the secret weapon that nobody talks about, I think, is really being able to communicate your weaknesses from a gentle place that makes people want to help you and accompany you.
That's great. Jessica, I think there's another piece of to what Jake is asking, and I might be wrong about that. Jake, you're welcome to chime in. Are there any, at this point in your career, are there any red flags you've noticed in people that you might work with, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I talked about that a little bit. I think ego, unchecked ego. I think people who rely on asymmetry. So there's a lot of power and control bullshit in Hollywood that really rubs me the wrong way, and I don't like it. And I don't like working with people that do that. But people who get off on power asymmetries and they need you to feel small in order to feel big. And unfortunately, there's been a very big industry of infantilizing celebrities and infantilizing actors. There's a whole industrial complex around the infantilization of perfectly functional adults, right? So agents, managers, business managers, hair and makeup, like there's all these people putting celebrity in a bubble and then they're completely incapacitated and nobody will say no to them, right? And that then when you stop making money, Johnny Depp, you know, nobody's there for you. But also Johnny Depp was enabled. But there was the thing about Johnny Depp that bums me out when I see this is like Johnny Depp didn't happen by himself. Johnny Depp had help. Johnny Depp had a lot of help and a lot of people enabling him. Forgive me if I'm incorrect, but like, so this idea that he's suddenly shunned from Hollywood by the very people who benefited off of him, right? It's a little insincere. But yeah, there's self-awareness. Again, it all gets back to really knowing yourself, trying to be honest with yourself, The Way of Integrity is a great book to kind of figure out what your true north is, what your moral compass is, what will and won't work for you, because it's different for everybody. It really is. There's no universal, you know, there are good principles and best practices, but.
Okay. So there's some questions in the chat actually. And again, I think if you have a question for Jessica, if you write to everyone, I think it'll appear so she can see it directly. Some people are sending questions to me and I'm passing them on. And I'm not sure if you have control of your own microphones, but it might be nice to get to actually speak the question to Jessica rather than have her read.
Where do you see editors standing in these new platforms? How much stake do you think editors will have in the future? Well, the editing tech is built into the platforms. So that's in my perspective, I would love to see what editors are doing with the tools that are there. You know, if you're locked into Avid, right, or Final Cut Pro, the TikTok platform might not be fun for you. But like, I think the transitions, if you study transitions, like transitions alone on TikTok, it's a masterclass of how to do transitions. I mean, this whole thing, you know, like the clever things people are doing with movement and limited resources are extraordinary, and you can learn a lot. So I think editors could learn a lot from TikTok, to be honest. From Paula, who were the writers, filmmakers that you looked up to or influenced your writing? Could you put the attachment book in the chat? Yes, I'll put the attachment book in the chat. It's called Attached. Okay, writers, filmmakers. Okay, well, I loved the movie Diner by Barry Levinson. I loved movies by writer-directors. So I loved American Graffiti. I loved Diner. I had a thing for the 50s. Happy Days was a big show when we were growing up. So in the way the 90s are big now, you know, the 50s had this big nostalgia around them because our parents, boomers, were from the 50s. And I saw Diner, and I really related to the way those actors, I mean, it's like, you know, Paul, it's just this group of actors at the prime of their life, and the way they're talking and what they're talking about was kind of elevating the mundane, but the American mundane in a way that really blew my hair back. And I saw it a bunch, and that had a big influence on me. Cameron Crowe, certainly, you know, Fast Times at Ridgemont High definitely had a big influence on me. Again, the American mundane, the elevation of the most little thing, like little quote, everyday stuff, really had a big influence on me. And I also loved, and you know, Rob knows this because he knows we have friends, the Waters brothers. I loved the Hong Kong action movies, which was unusual for a woman. Video games weren't what they are now. And there was like a video game aspect to the action sequences that I loved. And I remember, Rob, seeing, you know, Legend of Feng Sayuk with Danny and Mark, two friends of ours. And I was hooked. Peking Opera Blues, Chinese Ghost Story. So those movies were hugely influential for me because there was an absurdity. There was like an absurdist joy in the action that we didn't really have in action movies, right? I mean, Pulp Fiction brought that to America, but Pulp Fiction got that from the Hong Kong guys, right? So there was a joy and an absurdity, and it took pleasure in its own absurdity, if that makes sense. If you guys have never seen these movies, these sequences are now seminal, and they influenced everything from The Matrix to, you know, Crouching Tiger. But before, you have to imagine, before The Matrix and before Crouching Tiger, and even before Heat, because I feel like Michael Mann owes a bit of a debt to this style, here comes these movies that take they have a kabuki operatic level of joy that they're taking in their self-awareness of what they are, right? They're just chewing up the scenery, and that was just blew me away. And you can see that that's happening quite a bit in Stick It, for sure. You know, I'm definitely loving just elevating everything to its most imagined, just a heightened imagined conclusion in a way that brought me a lot of joy, and that I hoped would bring audiences a lot of joy as well. So those were some very influential things in my world. And I got to work with John Woo, which was a huge, you can only imagine, and Choi Hawk, who did Peking Opera Blues, and Michelle Yeoh. And I was just, and again, luck is the residue of design. So I just happened to be very proficient in talking about those movies. And somebody heard me talking about it and was like, oh, do you know who this is? It's like, it's Choi Hawk. And there had to be a translator. It was like, you know, so preparation, Like when you love what you love, that enthusiasm can be infectious. And that has also served me really well. And so that's why I say, don't try and fit yourself into a shape or a lane that really isn't, don't be lazy, don't avoid things, try things. But a really great piece of advice I got is like, again, if you know yourself and you know what you like, you can always get curious about stuff you like, right? You want to know more. You want to hit those natural veins of mining for gold and having fuel that's kind of natural. And pay attention to that. I loved Jan de Bont. Listen, when I saw the first Speed, yes, totally agree. He got that sequence in Speed where they fall out of the bottom. So he's having, he's having the sex scene as an action sequence. That scene, it's like they're consummating the relationship, but there's, with their clothes on, right? They fall out of the bottom of the bus and slide on top of each other and like end up on, what is it, in front of Mann's Chinese Theater? Spectacular, operatic, excessive, unbelievable, but who cares, right? Just so fun. Something tells me you'd probably like John Huston films, great trick. Yes, of course. I mean, he was a master at that. Absolutely. I studied with Andrew Saris, who is a film critic of note from the 70s. And he was the teacher at Columbia when I was there, and he was big on John Ford and The Searchers and Westerns. And so we would watch Westerns quite a bit. And John Ford also had that ability to invest in the small moment. No small moments.
We're almost out of time. We're almost at our hour. Does anyone have any last questions for Jessica, or anyone have anything that they like from her movies that they want to let her know about? Or was that a weird thing to say? I'm not sure. Anyway.
There are no rules.
Okay, Nikki, are you still there? I know Nikki's a big fan.
I'm still here. Hey, Rob.
Hi. Do you have anything you want to say to Jessica?
No, this was incredible. And yes, I did force my kids to watch Bring It On. No Shame was a favorite.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you had any comments on a favorite novel turned into a screenplay.
Ooh, that's a really good name. Adaptations are hard, right? Especially if you've read the book first and you have, we have such intimate attachment to our own movie version of the book. And so when we have to veer from our own movie, you've lived the movie in your head and then you have to see somebody else's interpretation. What a great question. So, God, I'm trying to think. Do you have one? Do you have a favorite?
I like Mystic River is one that I like.
I've never seen Mystic River.
Yeah, no.
It's Dennis Lehane, right?
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah, I hear it's great. It's epic. I've never seen it. Shame on me. What a great question. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while. I don't have a good answer for you off the bat.
That's okay. I'm going to read your book and come up
thank
with
you. I'm very. It's a fun little jaunt, and I'm very proud that I'm the first person to write a screenwriting how-to in screenwriting format. I can't believe nobody had done that yet. So enjoy. I hope you like it. I had fun writing it.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, of course. My pleasure, you guys.
Okay, you guys, I'm going to leave this on for maybe 5 minutes or so, and it might turn into chaos, but I thought if people want to say hi to Jessica or have a final question or whatever, they can do that. But I'm gonna cut this off at about 7:35 or 7:40. But thank you all, and let's give Jessica a hand for sharing her time with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. This was fun. Oh, cute.
Any, like interactions with Dutch directors in Amsterdam or something in Europe?
Sorry, Sam, could you say that again?
Yeah,
I missed the top of the
Dutch
question.
directors like Paul Verhoeven or like Jan de Bont. Did you have any interactions with them?
I've never met Jan. I never met him. I was a fan of his from Speed. and I know he was a DP, he was a cinematographer, and I'd heard some great stories, you know, that served him well in his career. And I know he was very respected for his facility with camera and his ability to, you know, talk people out of their nervousness around shooting certain stuff, because he had a great deal of confidence from having shot it. But yeah, the Dutch, you know, somebody was talking to me about Nordic noir recently, which is the kind of TV, you know, is it Borgen? You know, there's this whole genre on streaming platforms right now where
Jess, we've lost your audio,
Oh,
I think. Did we?
No,
I don't know.
No, I can hear.
Okay, great. No, they can hear me. Anyway, Nordic Noir is having a moment right now as all those shows migrate to the streaming platforms, and my friends are all obsessed. But I think, you know, I think there's a cold, there's kind of a very cold intelligence, you know, that I think of when I think of that, when I think of, I don't know if this is what you were going for,
Yeah.
thinking of, but there's a very cerebral quality
That's true.
to the films, that the ones that I'm thinking of. It's very cerebral filmmaking, which is very haunting and effective. Like there's definitely a category, and it makes me wonder, you know, the cold weather and the light, and like what culturally is influencing that, because it's such a signature. Would you agree?
Oh, totally. Yes, I spent all my life in the Netherlands.
Oh wow! And do you think it's the weather influencing?
Absolutely, it's the low sky. It's you got it. You nailed it. Absolutely.
Oh, you know, I've often wanted to teach. I've thought about wanting to teach there, to have a reason to go, you know, to go experience that part of the world, because it is. I loved Stockholm. I love Sweden. If you guys can ever go to Sweden,
Yes.
do it. And I wanted to explore more up there, because there's something untouched about the natural landscapes there.
Absolutely. Yes.
That is exquisite. Exquisite. And the filmmaking is so restrained.
It's true.
Right? I mean, if you
That's
think
true.
of all the minimal, if you think of the design that's come out of that part of the world, if we think of, you know, the mid-century modern, like the minimalism, and there's a real, it's so
Absolutely.
interesting. If you think about Italian filmmaking, right? Like it's so over the top, and I'm picturing Marcello Mastroianni. I'm picturing that Mastroianni film. Oh, I'm blanking on the
Dolce
filmmaker.
Vita.
Yes. The countries, you know, it's all becoming kind of more and more same, I think, as we're kind of becoming more global.
That's true.
Right? There's something samey, but if you look back, I think film becomes this really interesting history lesson about countries.
Yes. Totally. Thank you so much. It was absolutely.
Thank you. What a great question. Do you have a favorite movie, by the way? A favorite Dutch film? What's your favorite Dutch film?
In Dutch, Soldaat van Oranje, you know, of Paul Verhoeven, but in Dutch, which is the Soldier of Orange.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And I like Riphagen in Dutch.
Can you put those in the? Can you
Yeah,
put those
sure. I
in
would
the
do
chat?
that. Yeah, absolutely. And Black Book. It's really, these are my favorite movies.
Oh, I
love Paul
haven't
Verhoeven.
seen any of these. I don't think.
And I think Jan de Bont is the best, you know, cameraman ever. To be honest with you, that's true.
It's interesting. I think filmmakers, when they start in a certain discipline, they bring that gift to the filmmaking. So DPs, when they make movies, it has that. Writers, when they make movies, editors, when they make movies, they're bringing a much, you know, I think everybody brings their training bias into their filmmaking, right? Because that's their strength, for better or for worse.
Yeah. So,
Okay, you guys, I'm gonna shut it down. Jessica, I really appreciate you, and thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you guys. I had such a nice
You're welcome.
time. What a nice way to spend